All these years I've
Oh,
been calling you Nicola.
Okay, and we are almost live on Facebook.
Yay, Richard, thank you.
It
Oh,
is-
this is a nice small meeting. See, this feels very intimate. When I started the group, I wanted to have like nice little intimate meetings, but we had to do it, just via Facebook Messenger, where we were. So when Zoom started, it really bumped things up and to me feel like more like a book meeting.
Yeah.
Looks like we're good to go on Facebook. I'm not going to play it so it doesn't interfere with my tablet, but looks like we're all up and running there. I'll keep an eye on it. If anyone pops in with comments or questions, I can relay them to the Zoom.
Oh, do you think I should read her intro again? Or maybe I'll just let you introduce yourself. Do you want me to read that again? Or
Oh, whatever you want. I don't mind.
Go for it.
Who, me?
Do you want me to read it again, Richard? Were you able to hear?
Go ahead, Jill. Let's just
Okay,
start
I
from
love
the top
this
and
because
read
this.
it, and then I'll go, and I'm going to shut
All
up.
right, because then everybody on Facebook
Lynn.
will hear it. So I'm reading it from the second book here called Titanic True Stories of Her Passenger Crew and Legacy. I've been calling her wrong all these times. I've been calling her Nicola, but it's Nicola. Okay, so Nicola Pierce published her first book, Spirit of Titanic, which I have here, which I've had and then lost and then got again. Thank you. To rave reviews and 5 printings within its first month. A City of Fate, her second book, transported the reader deep into the Russian city of Stalingrad during the Second World War. Behind the Walls, a rich emotional novel set in the besieged city of Derry in 1689, was followed with a companion novel, Kings of the Boyne, also set in the 17th century during a defining moment in Irish history. So for all you history buffs. And her website is www.nicolapierce.com, which we'll put up on the website. And we would love to introduce her. And I guess I'll start with this book because it sounds like your connection to Titanic started with this book. I think I don't know if you were at the cemetery or you were visiting Harland and Wolff. I forgot. And so I will turn it over to you and you can tell us your story.
Well, I was working as a ghostwriter and I had done a lot of books for the O'Brien Press, who are an Irish publisher in Dublin. And a ghostwriter is writing those books. Sometimes it's miserable childhood or an interesting job. And I would be brought in to write the story for somebody else. So I'd usually work through email and send them about 300 emails and then sit and write their story as if I'm them. So I had done about, nearly maybe 10 of those type of books. And then the O'Brien Press rang me one day and asked me to think about doing something on the Titanic because the centenary was coming up. Now, I'd watched, I'm a huge Leonardo DiCaprio fan. And if there was a Titanic documentary on the television, I would watch it. But I had no great passion at this stage. And in fact, I think my initial thing was like, oh no, everybody knows what happened to that story. How can I kind of make it different? But the thing was, I had worked on this book here called Written in Stone. And I had edited this book. Tom Hartley, he's an ex-Lord Mayor of Belfast. And he basically did a book about Belfast City Cemetery. So it's everybody that's buried in the cemetery. It was a huge research job. And I had worked on this book and edited it for him. And I couldn't believe R474 Samuel Joseph Scott died 20th of April 1910. So all I read was this little patch here. Samuel was a 15-year-old from 70 Templemore Street in East Belfast, employed as a catch boy, which is a junior member of the riveting squad, in the Harland and Wolff shipyard. He is reputed to be the first person killed in an accident during the building of the Titanic. The burial records give the cause of death as a fracture of the skull. There is no stone on the grave. So when O'Brien Press rang and said, try a children's novel on the Titanic, I had remembered I'd worked on this book 2 years previous, and I'd never forgotten that this lad I had read about in this book here. Now, because I never knew that children were working in the shipyards, this was completely, I had no idea. So it just stuck with me that this 15-year-old boy was the very first Titanic associated death. And I knew that if I was going to write a children's novel, I wanted him to be my main character. Now, Samuel dies on the 20th of April, 1910. So I had a bit of a challenge to work out how I was going to use him to tell a story that doesn't happen until 2 years after he died. And I think because the death dates were almost the same, Samuel dies on the 20th of April, fell 23 feet from a ladder at the side of Titanic. So he's a catch boy running with the rivet, fell to the ground, died immediately from a fractured skull, and ended up buried in Belfast City Cemetery. So as I say, he dies on the 20th of April in 1910, and then Titanic dies on the 15th of April, 1912. And I think it was just because the dates were almost the same, I just came up with the idea that I would use his ghost, his spirit, to narrate the tale. So it's a children's novel, and I needed something that could go into first, second, and third class on the Titanic. I have Samuel following the crew around. He's listening in to the characters' stories, but he doesn't interfere with the action. Nobody knows he's there because he's a ghost. So this is when I'm talking about the book in schools. I tell children that using a ghost is a great way into any story. So
well, they do every now and then somebody would like go, ooh, I feel like someone's watching me, or
yeah,
you know,
Yeah,
he
that
called them.
chill would go up like somebody's spine, and you see him like turn down the corridor, and there's nothing there. I think that was a great way to kind of, you know, like you said, use him as the narrator. Just watching him go from all parts of the ship, that kind of view that you haven't really seen before, I thought was definitely very interesting.
Thank you.
And I like how you called them like the sensitive people, you know, people that are
the baby. The baby,
Yeah.
I thought the baby, kind of fast forwarding a little bit, when he was trying, the family, he wants to help them so bad, but obviously they can't see, and he's almost panicking. It's like, and then the baby focuses on him, and his realization of, if I could get the baby to react to me, the baby sees me, the family should follow. And that, you know, him basically playing peekaboo with the toddler, trying to get him to go, so and then the family basically follows the baby.
Yes.
If they hadn't have done that, you know, they never would have. And then with him in the father's in the water, and he's trying to figure out, how do I get the officers' attention so they see him?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was very heightened. I didn't expect it to be such an emotional book to write. I found it massively emotional because at the same time I was finishing one of my last ghostwriting projects, which was the story. There's a man, he lives in Dublin. He's 83 years of age, Jewish, and when he was 9, he was in Belsen concentration camp. So as I started my Titanic novel, I was coming to the end of his story, and there was a lot of similarities. The families on the deck of the Titanic, the women being told to walk away from the husbands, the fathers, and then Tommy Reichenschall, my Jewish man, had described how they get out of the trains at Belsen concentration camp and the families are just divided. And I think it really kind of, ghostwriting that book was probably the best thing I could have done while kind of getting my story together about the Titanic. I think it really added to it, and it just made it very intense. I just was absolutely floored by how emotional I felt when I was describing families having to walk away, having to split up, the fathers having to kind of nearly shove the family into the boat and hope for the best. And I know a lot of men lied, you know, I'll see you in New York and all that. And I really got caught up in all of that. The interesting thing about it is just to say that the book came out in 2011 and Samuel was lying in an unmarked grave in Belfast City Cemetery, which is where I read about him. And then the West Belfast Festival, this is the big festival up in Belfast. They wanted to do something that would bring the two communities together. So the West Belfast Festival were receiving criticism that they were too Catholic and that too many, most of the events were for Catholics and they were shutting out the rest of the population. So I've gone up to find Samuel's grave and I walked around Belfast City Cemetery. Now I knew he was lying in an unmarked grave, but I think somehow I just thought I'd be able to find it. And of course I couldn't. So I spent about half an hour, there's a massive graveyard. And then I had to go into the office and ask where the grave was. So the guy got down a logbook and told me to follow him outside. Outside, we just walked for about 5 minutes and then we stopped at a bare patch of ground. So I'm surrounded by headstones and he's telling me that this bare patch of ground I'm standing on is where Samuel was buried. Oh. So I felt really disappointed. I mean, it's so silly. I knew it was unmarked, but still to stand at a bare patch of ground. So Tom Hartley, that ex-Lord Mayor of Belfast, he brings tourists around the Belfast City Cemetery, and he would point to that patch of ground and say, there's the very first Titanic death. And he knew about my novel, so I went and said it to him. How can we mark the grave? And he said it to a friend of his, Danny Morrison, who was running the West Belfast Festival. And they rang me and said, we're going to put a headstone up on the grave. So this remains the highlight of my career to date, that this beautiful headstone went up. There was a huge ceremony in Belfast City Cemetery in 2011. So it just says Samuel Scott. Here lies the remains of Samuel Joseph Scott, age 15, who departed this life on the 20th of April 1910 in a work accident during the building of the Titanic, remembering his soul and all those who perished in the sinking of the Titanic. And then, of course, the words, near my God to thee. So I'm standing there waiting for this to be unveiled. Now, I've been interviewed, I've been on the news, was on television, there was newspapers asking me about descendants. I said, well, Scott is a really popular name. I don't think there is anybody. And as I stood next to the headstone, a young man came up to me and said, Miss Pierce, I saw you on the news last night. Now, I didn't know anything about your book, but I rang my grandmother and the whole family are here today. So he introduced me. This is Samuel's great niece or great grand niece. Yeah. Her father's brother was Samuel. So this turned into a really, really emotional day.
Father's brother was Sam. Because it sounded like he was an only child in the.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Yeah.
That he was
so when you wrote the book, right, you didn't have all this information.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Wow, because I have that on my hand. Was there any family members? And I was like, wow, that's probably a dumb question. So wow, that came out of your.
Absolutely. And the lovely thing, this was lovely. She's Margaret Donnelly. Now, they were initially Protestant, but at some point somebody converted and they were now Catholics. But it was a huge event in Belfast City Cemetery. A couple of hundred people turned up to see this being unveiled. Of course, it's Belfast. They're very passionate about the ship and anything to do with the ship. This man, as far as I remember, this is the grandson or great-grandson of Thomas Andrews. And I don't even think I spoke to him that day because I was so busy.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Yeah. And
That's
I don't even
amazing.
think I had a conversation with that man because I was so busy that day. So there's a massive crowd behind the cameraman. But Margaret Donnelly, it was a couple of strange things happened. I didn't know much about Samuel, so I did make him an only child. And I had to apologize really quickly because she started to tell me he had loads of sisters and brothers. But in the novel, I made that up, that his father died so soon. That was just coming out of my head, that I had his father die soon in the novel. And then it's his uncle, the father's brother, helps him get a job in Harland and Wolff. The reality of the situation is that Samuel's father did die when he was a boy. And his mother married the uncle. His mother married the uncle. No, I didn't know any of this.
His mother married his uncle.
Yeah. And in my novel, I just had the uncle helping him out, helping him.
Right, Uncle Al was his name. Uncle
yeah,
Al. He was like he was gonna, bring him up in the shipyard.
Yeah. And she was able to tell me. I mean, it was just wonderful. She was able to tell me there was no headstone because when he died, I mean, Samuel was the first Titanic death. So he's the first of the 12 people to die during the building of the Titanic. And when he died, Harland and Wolff only gave the family 14 shillings. The money went on the coffin, went on the funeral. They just had no money left for a headstone. And she told me that when Samuel died, his mother, Mrs. Scott, was so angry at the ship, the Titanic, that she cursed it. And then when the Titanic sank, this woman in East Belfast thought it was all her fault.
Oh, that is interesting. I've always heard people wonder, was the ship cursed with everything that went wrong?
Oh,
in a way she really was.
What a terrible thing to live with.
Imagine,
Absolutely.
how she must have thought. I mean, I would just imagine, excuse me, what in her fit of grief and anger, cursing and blaming the Titanic because it wasn't for Titanic. She'd still have her son, spewing that curse out, and then a few months later, something actually does happen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, and to this,
that is It's
It is, it's an amazing story. And to this day,
it gets
Samuel is still bringing his family together because a couple of brothers went to Canada. So only recently I've had Canadians writing to me to get in touch with the family in Belfast. So I just think Samuel is still kind of working away, still
Oh
bringing the
my
family together.
goodness.
Yeah,
yeah.
Oh my gosh, he gives you, he brings you, to the story, and then you create a story, and then the story, because 2011, correct me if I'm wrong, like Titanic Belfast wasn't even there yet. So,
No, I don't think it
no,
was. I
he,
think it might have been in the
wasn't.
because you
planning
were, you
stages.
were doing
But
things in Belfast
Yeah.
it was
before,
either in the planning stages or in the discussion, but it was not even.
No,
I don't-
no. It was just an area you could walk around called the Titanic Quarter, but no, there was no
Yeah,
talk of a museum back then. Um, and the thing is, when the museum was built, I was going all over Ireland talking about the Titanic and Samuel, and teachers started to ask me, "Have you been to the new museum in Belfast?" But I put off going because I couldn't understand how such a massive museum, it was a short story. She was only in the ocean for a few days, and I was afraid of my life that I would go and be disappointed. And I cannot afford to lose my
oh,
passion for the Titanic because I talk about the Titanic all year round. I travel around all of Ireland to schools. But I must say, thanks be to goodness, when I did go, I found it a very emotional. I went to my parents, and I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. I hope some of you may get to Belfast and see this wonderful testament and memory of the whole story.
yeah.
And
I don't.
comes with, sorry.
No, no. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say I don't think it is possible to lose your passion for Titanic. I think you can be disappointed in things. I had a similar experience where I was disappointed in the Titanic traveling expedition exhibit. It didn't. If anything, it made my passion stronger. I wanted to go. Why did you do it this way? This is terrible. We can do so much better. So if anything, I felt that disappointment in how her story was told and portrayed.
Yeah.
Again, I took my niece to her very first exhibit. I was like, this is her first exposure. So I felt like, okay, now I have to kind of go, no, there's more to it. It's more involved. Let's take this and grow from it.
Yeah.
So if anything, it was like, oh, stronger, more passion.
Yeah. And it's a wonderful. I just love this ship so much. She changed my life completely in every way. And also, I feel like I would be quite spiritual. I do feel, especially in the early days when I had done no public speaking. And once the children's novel came out, and then the centenary is coming up, I was being invited to talk in festivals and schools. I was terrified. I had never talked in public before in my life. So I used to, when I go to talk in a school, I will bring photographs. And in the early days, I'd just hide them, stand up with them.
oh,
So for instance, what I would say about this one is that I would say this is one of my very favorite photographs of the Titanic. It doesn't look like anything much. It's just a section of the side, but you can see how big she was. People are all the way down here. The reason I love this photograph so much that in the other photographs, it can be hard to see. The Titanic had lots of windows down the side. And here we can see
right.
the windows a lot more clearly, rows and rows of windows all the way down. To me, the windows are really important. She hit the iceberg at 20 to midnight. She sank at 20 past 2 in the morning. So all of this is happening in the middle of the night. The only light coming from anywhere is coming from Titanic herself, which makes that a really big moment when those lights go out. They said the ship began to rise up in the air, the lights flickered and went out forevermore. When those lights went out forevermore, that was the end of the young engineers and the electricians. They were told exactly what was going to happen if they chose to go down and stay in the engine room. They didn't want the heat going off. They didn't want the lights going off too soon and frightening the passengers. At about 2 o'clock in the morning, they were told, abandon your post, every man for himself. They refused to leave. So when I look at this photograph, I just think of the sacrifice that those men and boys made. So this is the way I
Nice.
kind of would present Titanic and show photographs. Now I do a PowerPoint presentation. In the early days, I was just holding up these photographs. Again, I felt that they helped me. So if I felt nervous going into a school or into an adult event, holding up the pictures of Harold Bride, like the Titanic crew, I actually felt I was kind of carrying them around with me. They were kind of helping me out. And I have had a couple of strange things with Samuel. when it was his centenary, so the Titanic centenary, 100 years, and then when it was his, what was it, 9 or 20, so Titanic was 2014, and then he would have been 20, sorry, yeah, I'm completely confused. I went on for Samuel's anniversary, and I met one of his descendants, Jared. We'd become good friends.
Oh, wow. I was going to ask
So
if you stayed in touch with the
Yeah.
family.
So I had gotten onto a train here in Drogheda. So I'm an hour and a half from Belfast on the train. Now it was winter time, it was April, it was freezing. I was wearing a big heavy coat. When I sat down on the train, I unzipped the coat and I saw a tiny white feather just here. So I forgot about it, right? And then I zipped up, got off an hour and a half later. Jared picks me up and I kind of say, oh, I had a feather on me. And then we're sitting at his grave, at Samuel's grave. It was the most beautiful morning. It had been freezing. So I unzipped the coat. And at some point, I'm talking to Jared. We're sitting at Samuel's grave. And then I see Jared's eyes going up and he went, is that your feather? And the little feather that was on me just did that for a couple of seconds. And then it flew off very, very, So it's just, I do feel that I kind of feel helped by the Titanic crowd if I get nervous or stressed, and I certainly would have been talking away to Samuel in the early days or in the early years, definitely. The interesting thing though, Mrs. Donnelly, she died a few weeks later. So they have known that their ancestor was somewhere in Belfast City Cemetery. They tried to get somebody to find out where the grave was. And can you imagine then, Jared turns on his television the night before the headstone has been unveiled. They knew nothing about me, knew nothing about the book. And there I am standing there in Belfast City Cemetery. And he hears me saying, Samuel Joseph Scott, and it's going to be unveiled tomorrow.
Oh my gosh.
So,
they're like, wait, you're talking about
Yeah.
because there's not a lot of information about the people that worked on, when I
Yeah.
started
No,
the
there
Support
really
Harlan and
isn't.
Wolf page, I met some people whose parents, worked at the shipyard or
Yeah.
fathers, but there's not a lot of I guess if you buy Tom McCluskey's books about the shipyard.
Reading the book and learning about Samuel was my first real introduction to the workers and what they experienced and what working on the ship and the passion that they had. A little while before I read the book, I had watched a wonderful documentary on the building of the Titanic, and this was a wonderful supplement to it. I felt Samuel's passion, for his work, the joy he felt, and I felt that to kind of go with the story, that passion is what led him to become a ghost and travel with Titanic and, kind of fulfill his dream, and I was like, rooting for him the whole time. It's like, oh, it made a little bit more sense now. Just, he loved Titanic so much. Well, that would make sense that he'd want to stay with her even after his passing and yet not blame her for his accident. It was, I feel that in a way he knew that his job was dangerous and that something could happen to him.
I'd say the catch boy. I think that was I think anyway, the catch boy was the most dangerous job of all. We kind of, after doing all the research and that, I mean, those boys were balancing on, ledges or something like that and trying to catch the tongs are being thrown or the rivet was being thrown. They're having to try and catch it. And the speed, because they got paid per rivet, so they would
he said he
they could
had to keep track in his head of how many rivets. That is and you're just a young
and then you're carrying heavy tongs and a hot piece of metal running up these 30 feet in the air. I mean, I just it boggles the mind on this little bitty board up the scaffolding. The only I think that might be worse than that were the coal miner kids. When it comes to which is more dangerous, probably not by much. To think that kids that young back then, and he was proud of his work.
And I was talking about Titanic for a few years, and it was only after a couple of years, I would explain what a rivet team was, and that there would have been a heater boy, and he was normally 14 or 15 years of age. Then I found a photograph of a heater boy, and he looks about 10. That's a heater boy.
He looks really young.
Doesn't he?
Very young. No protective gear or anything, working around the hot.
OSHA did not, I don't know about the European one, but OSHA did not exist back then. That was not a thing. Safety gear, nope.
Absolutely. And when I first went to the big new museum in Belfast, there was no mention of anyone who died during the building of the Titanic. So it was all about the passengers and all about the crew. And I was kind of disappointed. But then I went back, I think I was about a year later, I went back, and you go out the back of the museum where the ships were built, where Samuel would have died. And they have the names now. So there is an actual section in memory of the 8 men who died during the construction and launch of the Titanic. So what's sad is the last 3 are still unknown. I don't know if you can see that. They don't have any names for them.
So they know that they've died, but they don't know who they are?
Yeah.
Were they not recorded, like, when there was an accident? Did, like, Holland and Wolf not keep track of the names?
You would think
that
so. Yeah, I don't understand.
Maybe they wouldn't want to, because maybe...
Yeah, absolutely. But,
it's funny that you mention the people lost in the building not being mentioned in Belfast. I can't think of any museum that I've been to, even the traveling ones, that mention people being lost in her construction. You're right. Even when you get the lists of names, like none of them seem to mention any of the builders, the actual construction workers. It's all the passengers.
Yeah.
Now you got me thinking. I'm actually going, fingers crossed it works out, taking a road trip in a few months. One of the stops planning on being Tennessee, Pigeon Forge, and Branson. I might bring that up to them when I talk to some of the people there and just ask, hey, just out of curiosity, why is there, and I could be wrong about this when I go. If I find out I'm wrong, that's different. Why is there no mention for the construction workers who were lost? To me, those would be the Titanic's first victims. If you want to,
absolutely.
Even when you go through the walkthroughs and you're looking at her, learning about her construction, there's no mentions that people lost their lives. Their lives.
I didn't know that. Yeah. It's not something I knew until I was working on that book. I had no idea people died during the building of the Titanic.
I guess you could say 12 people lost out of a crew of thousands, but still, that's 12 men, boys that gave their lives so she could be built. Without them, Titanic never would have happened,
Absolutely,
so they deserve just as much honor and remembrance as passengers, if not more so.
Yeah.
I have Mary Jocelyn's contact information at the Titanic Museum. I think it would be good if you emailed her and told her about your book, because they have a fantastic library, and explain the story and what you found, because I think she'd be very interested in I'm speaking for her here, but I think she'd be interested in having your book in her store and having this information added to the museum.
Is this the Branson Pigeon Forge museums?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. They're very, very open about, the owners are very open about, stuff like that, from what I've heard,
Yeah, because my publisher, they sold the rights to a Canadian publisher. So that came out in 2013. But I think it's just a small publisher, Boulder Press in Canada. But I do find it quite frustrating. They haven't sold American rights yet, and I'm telling them Titanic is huge in America.
Oh,
they haven't been able to sell the rights.
I think I'm a member of 100+ groups on Facebook alone.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, there's supposed to be a museum or something in Niagara Falls that it's supposed to be opening.
Yes, it was supposed to be another museum opening linked with Branson and Pigeon Forge that was confirmed before everything went down. Definitely happening, but now with everything going on, I haven't heard anything. All that's been put on hold, but was pending, definitely happening, and then the pandemic broke out, so I'm not sure if that's gonna be put on the full back burner or dumped entirely, but that was a thing that was going to happen, and it was going to be linked with Branson and Pigeon Forge.
Okay, that sounds
so a whole brand new museum. I had heard, and this has not been confirmed, the possibility of an attraction linked with Orlando. What's that park with the movies and everything? I can't remember the name of the park. Not Disney.
Universal Studios?
Universal Studios was supposed to be in talks with potentially getting a Titanic attraction themselves. Now, I haven't heard anything about that, and that was just supposedly somebody talking
Right.
about this was going to happen. I
Yeah.
haven't heard anything, but I've been following that. Niagara Falls was confirmed prior to the epidemic, so hopefully once all
Yeah.
this is something they can start building again, that will happen. But there's into this, the second one could happen as well, so that could be 2 brand new attractions in the States.
Fantastic. Well, you see, my thing is, I also wish, I don't think the film studios, film guys realize that very, very young children are absolutely obsessed with the Titanic, and there is no film for them. There's no film for them. So my dream would be to get Spirit of the Titanic. I mean, it's a ghost story on the Titanic. You know, it's an easy kind of sell. So that's kind of would be my dream. But you know, because like I've met 4-year-olds obsessed about the
Oh, I
Titanic.
read about that.
How old's Caden? Caden's what, 8?
Caden just
Jill?
turned 10. He runs that
10.
book club
My-
for children.
My nephew, I have a 12-year-old nephew and an 11-year-old niece, big
Yeah.
Titanic buffs. We
Yeah.
have Caden, who does the children's version for our book club group. We should look into having him do something for Caden's Corner for Spirit of Titanic, if he hasn't done so already.
I
Yeah.
know
I think
we
that
were
would be a
unsure
great
with
way to
the.
promote it.
Well, we wanted to find out what you thought the good right age group was. We weren't sure, you know,
Oh,
if certain details were too much for kids or if it was
Well,
I mean,
I
the story is a little much, but
Yeah. Oh,
I-
9 years and upwards. And I
okay.
find, like, I mean, I don't shy away from
Yeah.
death in the novel or in my talk. The only thing that maybe kids get a bit caught up in is when I talk about the animals, the dogs.
Oh, I know.
Brown
Me
Yeah,
too.
that definitely.
The people hugging, the hug,
Yeah,
and you're in
Like,
this book.
the people weren't gut
hugging
wrenching
the
enough.
animals.
Then she had to throw the dog in on top of everything. Like, the people weren't gut wrenching. You know, you've already ripped my heart out. Now you're gonna add the dog on top. You know.
Yeah.
Then in the end, when the dog gets to go in the lifeboat to heaven too, I was like, oh, the doggy gets to go too. You know.
Well, that's funny because a teacher just sent me a whole pack of they had been reading the Spirit Titanic, and she sent me, oh, they're over there, but basically I got 30 letters from children telling me how much they love the book. And one boy today asked and said, was the dog rescued? You never said, please tell me, was the dog rescued? You know, so they really do latch on to anything with animals. But they all chose Samuel as their favorite character. A whole lot of them, you know. So I just love that, you know, that they do react.
Yeah,
to
I
that.
can see where Samuel with he definitely appeals to kids because, you know, as kids themselves, I feel that he's
Yeah.
definitely relatable. Even in today's modern times, I feel that Spirit of the Titanic is a great gateway book to children, young adults.
Yeah.
Learning more about Titanic. You know, if I had picked this up in the library, not knowing what I already know, it would definitely say, gee, this story sounds great. This story is interesting. I want to know more. And then lead into who knows what rabbit hole that could lead a person down. You know, it's just a great intro.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
brilliant.
definitely.
Thank you.
So what did the family think of your book after they read it?
Yeah, they really liked it because it went to Canada and then it was around Belfast. So no, they were just absolutely thrilled. And it was because when Mrs. Donnelly died, they let me know, and I actually went to the house. She was being waked. So I was really shy. I am really shy. And then I'm going, and I only met the family once, and this woman is now in a coffin in the front room. But they opened the door and just greeted me, brought me in. And the first thing I saw, Mrs. Donnelly had the newspaper article about me and her. She had it it was the first thing I saw. And then I went in and saw her in the coffin. But this was just a few weeks later, you know, so they were really grateful that the grave had been found, so that she could die happy, I suppose, you know.
Yes,
yeah.
and you know,
Yeah,
and know that someone's like honoring his memory. You know, you're keeping him alive. That's what I always thought.
It's funny.
With this book was.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I find there's similarities with Samuel's story with him being buried in an unmarked grave. A town coming together is very similar to what happened with Frederick Fleet and his headstone.
Yeah, that's right.
There was the town and family. He was in an unmarked grave for the longest time. Another enthusiast found out and rallied the town to place a beautiful headstone on his grave too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to see that, you know, again, everything kind of comes full circle, you know.
Absolutely.
That these they don't deserve to be forgotten. Now they can be remembered, and their
Yeah.
places can be visited.
Yeah. And there is
And
beautiful
I
art.
found, people are always looking for new information every time there's something new. So even though you've written this book a while ago, I think I somehow missed that you met the family. I mean, that just adds to your story, and that you
Yeah.
had this list of people, and you didn't just write a fantasy book about somebody that was imaginarily on. You did a lot of research and learned a lot, and I think that's a lot that you could share with people. And it, like Alicia said, it brings people to just a different part of the story, which I find that anytime something new and exciting comes into the Titanic community, everybody gets all excited again, and they're all renewed because
Yep,
everyone's always
definitely.
waiting for something
Those who are
new
already
to
in the
learn.
community get really excited, and they help and guide the new people coming in who may be finding Titanic based on whatever the new thing is, whether it be good or bad. And this is obviously a good entry. And it's a great way, like I said, hey, I read this book. Oh, did you know that? Well, this is a work of fiction, and it's based off a historical event. Here's more information. Here's this group. Here's, and then, wow, this is so fast. Let me go to the museums. Let me, visit the graves, it just brings more people into this huge family, and I feel that we are a family,
A real community. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you ever consider putting out another book that kind of brings in his real story,
No, well,
or you kind of let this?
I don't know. I thought if O'Brien Press ever came back and said we want another Titanic novel, I would have loved to tell the story of Carpathia, or
Right.
in a novel, children's novel, what was going on with the Carpathia. And
that needs to be written. There's not enough. We just did Voices of the Carpathia for this month's nonfiction book,
George
and
Behe.
I learned so much. And again, that's just so that I feel that night what happened aboard her is not as well known, other than the fact that she raced to the rescue.
Yeah.
Other than that, what actually went on board is very. I would, if you write it, I would definitely read it. And I'm sure I can speak for others. And it's almost a story that needs to be told, So the interest is out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just it's just huge. I'm lucky. A lot of teachers in Ireland are using the novel as a school book. And I have a lot of kids, it's just because they love it. It's just the Titanic. I'm so, as a new children's writer, I had a really easy road because I could walk into a boys' school or into a girls' school and just say Titanic and immediately have their attention. Where someone else might have to work hard, and maybe the boys wouldn't want to listen to a female writer talking about, their books. So I just ended up getting a lot. The doors just kept opening. I was so busy. 2012, I lived out of my suitcase. I was just all over Ireland. It was just unbelievable. I don't know how. I was absolutely very, very tired by 2013. But I'm still as busy about the Titanic today. I mean, my new book had just come out just before COVID hit.
This one.
Yeah, well, that one came out just.
Oh, you had another one that came in because this is
Yeah.
2018, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So that came out just before actually I started chemo. But the other, my latest is
She's
about
a cancer survivor, people.
Yeah, exactly.
We have that in common.
But the Chasing Ghosts, this would be kind of similar to Titanic, but this is about a doomed expedition to the Arctic in 1845. HMS Terror and Erebus, led by John Franklin.
I know that story. I love that story. That is such. That's going on the list too. Is that available yet?
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah.
This book comes clogging people a fortune. That's what we're reading.
I'm just gonna search for my author name now. I'm not even gonna go with the title.
Well, we'll have to put a list up in the book club too.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So then, what brought you to this book? And we have Steve Hall here, who's listed as one of your.
Yeah, he was a great help. It was the photographs was the biggest challenge with that book. I had never had to source photographs before, and that was a full-time job. That took about I think it's 20 photographs, but it took
because you just can't put a photo in. You have to do your research. And...
Yeah, And it was a woman at the Library of Congress actually was a great help too. But that was really tough because there's so many photographs about Titanic on the internet, but then when you go into them, you can't find who owns them or where do you go to get permission.
Right.
You know, so that took a long time. But again, I had these wonderful little kind of things that happened. J.P. Morgan. I was reading, you know, I love when I'm working on a book, but I'm reading something else for pleasure. And then I end up finding out something about the book I'm working on. So I was reading this wonderful book by Timothy Egan, Short Nights of the Shadowcatcher. And it's the life of Edward Curtis. So he wanted to document Native American Indians. And it's a wonderful biography, actually. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, wait, I think I read about this in here, right? That was in here. Is this the one with all the images and everything?
He wants to document Native Americans before they're gone.
Right.
And he approaches J.P. Morgan for money. And Morgan says no initially, and then says, okay, because he loved the photographs.
I'll have to get that title from you too, or maybe you had that in here.
And then my husband, Niall, and I are over in Amsterdam about 2 years ago. And we're walking through a big square in Amsterdam. And there's it was a Sunday, it was a massive secondhand book market. And I was just walking through, mind my own business. And I just felt, I don't know what I felt, this ear grew warm. And I look over and this was looking at me. So
that's the book, because that's the book with all the images that.
Yeah, it's one of them. Well, I mean, it wouldn't be original, but it's an
my God.
It's Edward Curtis. And
what did you? I was just reading that today because I was reading your book in the park, and I was like, "Whoa, that book looks like." How did you find that? Let's see that. Wow.
So I could not believe. Yeah, this stuff kind of, when it comes to Titanic, all this stuff kind of happens. You know,
well, because it leads to another story, and it leads to another story,
My stepfather is Cherokee Indian, pure blood Cherokee Indian.
Oh, right. Okay.
So just real quick, I have Chasing Ghosts is going to be released on the 30th.
It's out now. Chasing Ghosts is out now.
Okay.
Out in March.
Okay. No, I'm on Thrift Books, and they have it for the end of the month, the 30th, as a release date.
All right.
So maybe the States is going to be a different date.
Yeah, it could be. All right.
That is going on my list.
Fantastic. You'll have to let me know what you think now when you read it.
I know. We'll have to have another meeting and talk about other books. And you know what? I also like mentioning J.P. Morgan. You were talking about his nose, how he had that rosacea. So that's something I didn't know either, that he was, avoiding, having his picture taken. And,
it's a fantastic photograph. He's actually shaking the stick.
Yeah, gosh.
I have rosacea.
I can't even pronounce it.
Another thing.
If I could. I know. I didn't know it could get that bad, but he obviously had a bad case.
Yeah.
It can range in how bad it can be. Like, it can be mild like mine, or it can be really bad.
This is the one where he's like, get away
yeah.
Even back then it was like putting a hand in front of the lens, right? Don't take my picture.
Like, don't take,
So they had paparazzi even back then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So how did you find Steve here? How did you connect with Steve and have his help?
I think I must have joined the Titanic early pages, like back in 2011, 2012. And I just noticed that Steve was always really lovely and always a calm kind of voice, because it was the pages that used to get a bit fiery if anyone asked the wrong question or something.
Yes.
And I think that's where I kind of noticed your name too, Jill. You were very good at smoothing things down, and
I just don't like conflict. So I'm like, God, I need a group where people don't argue. Can they argue about events or books? Like this, try to minimal, because people, you're right, people do get very passionate about. Yeah, and Steve has that nice, calm, kind
Jill,
presence.
Chasing Ghosts is available on Kindle for $7.49. It is available on Kindle for right now. Yep.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, this is great. You're just adding to our reading collection. We love to read. And we love history.
Do we have, I'm so sorry, do we have true stories on the reading list for one of our books of the month, or are we pretty much?
No, we need to add that in there.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to put it on if we don't have it already.
Yeah,
I kind of wish
definitely.
that we had linked this one in with Voices of the Carpathia if we had known about it sooner. It would have been nice to have seen the two kind of maybe read together, or even one after the other.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because they both deal with passengers, one on the Carpathia and
Yeah.
one on Titanic. It would have been nice to see, be able to compare the two.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I
Yes.
love passenger stories. That's, I refuse to
Definitely, me too.
Titanic. I
Yeah.
refuse to see the movie. I came in around the movie, but because of the movie, but not because I watched the movie. I'm the kind of person that refuses to see a movie until I read the book. So obviously Titanic was coming out and I said, I am not going to go see that until I learn my history. So then I just took every book in the library out. I thought, oh my gosh, these stories. And I don't think I even ended up seeing the Titanic movie till it was like in our budget theater. It was way past, being out. But Titanic calls you to her,
Yes.
in different ways. And so,
I kind of see what you'll say. I had when the movie came out, I had seen it in the theaters with my brother and sister. Neither one of them really knew the Titanic story. They knew a little bit through me, my sister a little bit more than my brother, and they were blown away by that movie.
Yeah.
Because Alicia won't shut up about this. She won't. So to watch, I'm like, and then they go to me pointing out what was fact and fiction. One of the things with me was I can't do this with my remember. I couldn't watch her take her final plunge. I actually walked up to the back of the theater and basically just sat in the corner by the door and just cried.
Yeah.
And it was so emotional. And even my sister, and then we come in the theater, we're like, they wouldn't shut up about what we had just seen, so.
I still think though my favorite film will always be A Night to Remember.
Definitely, I'm sorry. As good as James Cameron was, it's just, you can't compare. It's like comparing apples and oranges. I guess as a history buff, I lean more towards the accuracies of A Night to Remember, even though they do have but they don't need the fictional story to tell the story. Cameron felt he had to have the Jack and Rose story to tell, and I'm like, no, you don't. You so easily could have done it without them, because now Titanic becomes a backdrop. It becomes, another part of people don't realize what they're looking at, is actually a fictional event thrown into non-fictional event. And it has created quite a few problems in the community with the whole Jack and Rose thing.
I get asked in every school as Jack and Rose. I bet my favorite question I was asked by a girl about 9 or 10 years of age. She asked, what does RMS Titanic stand for? And I said, Royal Mail Ship Titanic. And she was like, oh, but how do you know it's a boy ship or a girl ship?
Well, I guess in a way that's just a good question. I think it goes from country to country. I know most countries refer to ships as she, but I think there's a couple of them that actually use the he pronoun for them.
It's just I've 100 questions to answer with this class today. Loads of questions. But kids really do. There's just something about the Titanic. It just captures their attention. I don't think the story will ever be let go. I think it'll always be around us, Yeah,
and those young people, they're going to carry the story on, that's why. Gosh, Richard and Steve, you guys are quiet, so we're going to be quiet in case you want to chime in.
I've been sitting here soaking it up, so a lot of interesting information.
Thank you.
Wait a minute, hold on.
He's looking something up. Did you want to say anything, Steve? We're so happy that you're here.
Oh, I thought they were
sound.
And I showed the
sound. I don't think your sound is working. It says no sound. He has to just smile and wave.
This is what I'm going to be doing after the meeting.
Oh, brilliant. Fantastic.
And then I have the hardcover will be here on Thursday.
Oh, wow. Oh, brilliant. Oh, I really appreciate that.
Oh, we'll have to talk after the meeting about, if you're interested in connecting with the Titanic Museum and
Yeah.
because I think that would actually make a great new part of their exhibit, where because when I went to the Titanic Museum the first time, Branson, I thought it was going to just be cheesy. I feel really embarrassed
Yeah.
saying this, but when it's kind of in like, I don't know if you've ever been
That's a little
to
pricey.
Niagara Falls. It's all like Madame Tussauds,
Oh, I'd
and
love to,
the
but no,
weird
I
and
haven't.
wacky. But it was just a weird place. But when you go in there, it's really well done, and you actually really do learn a lot. And
Yeah.
they keep the children so captivated, and they really focus on the children, and a lot of the workers and staff, they break out into story with the kids and really try to draw them in. So they think that's another part of the Titanic story that
Yeah.
Yeah,
because
I haven't
mostly
been
you see
there.
Titanic being launched. That's usually the
Yeah.
beginning. Launch, May
Mhm.
31st, 1911. Like a lot of
Yeah,
people aren't thinking about, what, except
yeah.
for like the meeting with Bruce Ismay,
I
Yes.
think it depends on what museum you go to, because I know with ironically, this would have been a great opportunity. The one in Orlando, at least before they moved to the new location, they start with her building. And
Ah,
you first room you walk into
Oh, that's
in
nice.
Orlando, at least the old location, I haven't been to the new location, so I won't speak for that one, is she's in her gangway being built, and the first person you speak to is a worker, and that's your intro. And
Oh,
that again would have
nice.
been a great opportunity that wasn't taken to discuss Samuel and the worker stories, and that part was done very briefly. You skip right from this brief room of her being built to sailing day.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So again, you talk about again kind of missed opportunity to tell an unknown story that needs to be maybe
Yeah.
told a little bit more in detail.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I know a woman who's writing a story about Harlan Wolf too, Janice. She's actually one of our members. She'd probably be interested in talking with you because this is a true story that really happened to someone,
Yeah.
because I think sometimes when you write a fiction book, the true part of it gets a little bit lost. So I think you have to work a little harder to let
Yeah.
people know that
Yeah.
there is a true story in
Yeah.
here
Yeah,
about
I
a
think
real
again,
person.
and this is definitely not knocking the
Because
book,
I'm
but
usually a little bit like, oh, fiction, because sometimes, although there are books out there where you're like, wow, okay, but most
yeah.
part, I'm like,
Yeah, common issue with historical fiction, especially, and again, this is not knocking the book, is there's obviously some well-known facts
Yeah.
that were obviously changed in your narrative, and for some people, maybe research. No, like, well, wait a minute, this book said this, this book says that.
Yeah.
You have to
oh
remember that
yeah, people
your
pick it
book, yeah,
apart and
your book,
everything.
and I actually kind of found myself doing that a little bit and almost not enjoying the story.
Mhm.
But then I said, well, wait a minute, step back a little bit. This is a fictional story. Don't look at it from the historical
Yeah.
aspect. Just enjoy this wonderful story. And once I did that and kind of removed myself from this is historically not accurate,
Yeah.
kind of like the James Cameron movie, I actually enjoyed the book much more. But in a way,
Right.
you almost kind of have to have that little bit of blinders on going into it because it can kind of mess it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Or I'd even suggest the book to someone. Here, read this first. Again, like I said, as your intro, as your gateway, and then again we can discuss why this is inaccurate. This happened versus that, and it doesn't really, take away from the story itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
does Encyclopedia Titanica have Samuel on their list? Because I know that they keep track of passengers, but they also keep track of important people in the story.
I
Very
can.
good. Oh, there's Steve. I can see
Oh,
him.
Steve, we can hear you.
I haven't been able to see him.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, how do we? Oh, so on top of
I
your
have.
screen, there's a gap. There's a button. Are you on a computer?
Me? Yeah.
Okay, I should have told you this before. There's a button on top that says gallery view or speaker view. So you
Oh,
might
okay.
be on speaker view where you're only seeing yourself. It's
No,
up
I can
on.
see you and Alicia. I can see Steve now. I hadn't been able to see Steve at all. I could see you and Alicia, all right?
No, I
Oh,
was just gonna say we have them on visual now, but you might need to swipe her screen.
Okay,
I'm
there we
trying to
go.
get on Titanic Expedia now. Is now.
Hi, Nicola. How are you?
Hello, how are you?
I'm pretty good, thanks, bud.
What
It's a
time is
little
it over there? What time is it with you?
too bloody early, mate. It's started at 6 a.m. and I said to Jill yesterday that if I'm awake, I'll come down, but I didn't think I would. But I just woke up this morning and I come down at 6 o'clock. So yeah, it's
Good
I'm
morning.
half asleep.
Good morning. You're starting your day. I wish I could hand you a cup of coffee here, Steve.
No, I've already had 3 coffees, Jill, and the sun's just coming up now, so I'll go for a walk
Lovely.
soon. So
The sun is gone here. Well, we didn't have it today. It's 10 past 10 here at night in Brada, Ireland. So it's starting to
yeah,
get dark.
what's the temperature over there, Nicola?
Oh, today was about 15 degrees.
Yeah, that's about 18 here today. So it's winter time. So
Yeah.
certainly that's better than 40 degrees Celsius, isn't it?
Yeah. Wouldn't be able for that.
Oh, right.
Hey.
Our summer. I remember when I went to Australia right after I graduated high school, it was a gift. I used to babysit for these kids that were from Australia, and they invited me over. So summer vacation, I was so excited. I packed my bathing suit and everything. And then I got there and I was like, oh, it's winter. Why didn't anybody tell me this?
Yeah.
But we still had a good time in Sydney Harbor. And
Mhm.
yeah, so you guys are going into your cold time. How cold does it get there?
That was Steve, is it?
Steve,
Question
yeah, in
from- yeah.
Australia. Yeah, sorry, I was talking about Australia.
Here, where we
Yeah,
are.
in your winters, it gets,
Yeah. So you guys use Fahrenheit, don't you? But
yes.
no, it's about 9 degrees Celsius is the coldest gets. You know, I mean, you know, I was, I'm in the 60s now, but I can't remember Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
But,
it's okay. I remember
but
being there. I don't think you had snow. You don't get, but I
no,
think
well, we do in Australia, but further south. But I mean, I still think of height in feet and inches. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
all this. So how can you be 1.2 meters? I got no idea. But yeah, it gets quite hot here and quite debilitating. Where I am at the moment, or where we live, is about 20 kilometres south of the most easterly point in Australia.
oh,
Nice.
So we're middle of, it's not the middle of nowhere, but I mean, if I want to go somewhere, it takes it takes a long time to get there. And I remember that I had to go to New York, and then I had to catch a bus from here to Brisbane, which took 2.5 hours.
wow. Is that when you
Spend the
went for the Titanic 2 event?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and then spent the night in a hotel, and then it was 9 hours to Seoul on the plane, then 13 hours from there to New York,
Wow.
2 hours in customs, an hour and a half to get to the hotel in Manhattan. So I think it took 32 hours and had a meeting about 3 hours later. I went all the way over there for dinner.
You
Oh
went
my
for
God.
dinner, and it wasn't the best dinner from what I heard from you and Helen.
I can't really say, but I was supposed to go to Halifax the next morning.
Oh my goodness, you did. What
Yeah,
did you go there for an
I
event?
don't know what though. I've got no idea. So I said I'm not going. I said I can't make it. I said I'm too long in the tooth. So
Yeah, you
so I
must
was
have been
supposed to go up there for 2
exhausted.
days and then come back and then be in New York for 2 days and then fly back. And everyone else was flying over to England. And Daniel was supposed to go to England. Daniel, his daughter, was supposed to go to England, but he couldn't go, and they forgot that I could have gone. So I flew back home, but I just stayed in New York for 5 days. Yeah, which was, I'd never seen the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to get away from the city. Did you go
No,
down to Pier 54 or anything while you were
No, I
there?
didn't go anywhere actually. I mean, to be honest, really, I can't remember what I did. I did go to the Dakota building, yeah, where John Lennon was shot.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And and then I was there at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. in the morning, and I was opposite the building, and there's a fella there, and he's selling newspapers near the entrance to a Subway, and he said something about Yoko or something. I said, well, I'm not interested in Yoko, you know. And so I walked through Central Park, and there'd been a bit of snow or something, and then walked down to, was it Times Square or something, and then back to the hotel. So I didn't go and see where the Twin Towers come down or anything, you know. I just, whatever. I sort of thought, I should have done more. I was getting paid to be there.
Well, plus you drove a lot of hours, you know, you flew, and, you know, that was a lot of work to get there.
Exhausting.
No one next to me on the plane all the way over. And there I am looking out the window as it comes into New York, and I said the Statue of Liberty, which made me think of Titanic.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
coming in,
That's what they wanted it to do. They wanted to go and, you know, for
but
their
anyhow,
new
you know, but I thought I'd drop in this morning, you know. I wasn't sure I'd wake up. Normally, wake up, you know.
That's
But
so
I'm here now.
nice. It was nice
Yeah,
to see you and her.
Yeah, well, I'm just sitting here with the water bottle on my lap. That's how cold it is.
Oh gosh. I'll send you some of our heat. I think it was like around 70s. I don't know what that is.
I'll let you guys talk.
Oh wait, Alicia's saying something, but I don't hear
sorry.
it.
I was just saying. Did I mute one? Oh, I was muted. I'm on Titanic Encyclopedia now, and I don't know if you guys can see. She was showing the picture before. You guys tell.
What is that, Samuel?
The Catch Boys.
Oh yes. Yeah, the heater boys heating up the rivets.
Heater boys.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, they have a very brief little dit. It's not even so much about him, it's just more about, and then there's a shot of another shot of the grave.
Right.
Yeah. This is on Encyclopedia Titanica. It doesn't really mention, I guess, because there's not much known about him. But you were saying how with the Statue of Liberty and everything being related. I'm about 45 minutes or so from Sandy Hook, which is the area where the Carpathia came in on the approach to New York, and where she was met by the huge fleet of tugboats. And that's my favorite beach. I've been to there 100 times, and it wasn't until recently that I found out that area's Titanic connection.
Oh wow,
Like,
that's brilliant. I must say, I mean, Belfast is. I mean, it's great to go, but another place is Cove in Cork. Was the last place that she was sighted from land, and they'll point you and say there's where she was, you know. And I find that's actually probably more emotional than Belfast, knowing that and standing looking the last place that she was seen, where she was actually docked. So if you ever get to Ireland, make sure you make time for Cove as well as Belfast.
Oh, that's what I've heard.
Yeah, Southampton too, even though I've heard there's not much there. Even the dock where she originally was, there's really nothing there that says Titanic was here. If you don't already know, you would never know, like, you know. So I'm surprised that there's like no plaques. In fact, the thing where they had her ropes tied to, people have just basically been chipping that thing away.
Yeah.
That's not good. What happened?
No.
And New York, next time you're in New York, if you ever come back, Steve, or if you come, Dave Gardner does a wonderful Titanic tour. So he takes you around to all the locations, you know, the important.
Done that. Need to do it again.
And the cemetery. Yeah, you did do his tour. And
we need to do the cemetery tour next, though.
And then he ends up at they've knocked the whole pier down. I don't know if you've seen, but they knocked down Pier 59 and a bunch of those, and they built this giant park with a golf course on it, pushing out into the Hudson. And it's on these, like, it's a very interesting looking building. It looks like there's like built on like golf tees or something.
Yeah, there's nothing left from the original pier. And at Pier 54,
except for the arch.
The arch is still there, at least.
Right.
And you can still read like White Star Line, and then you can read Canard written over that.
Yeah, I think Dave did confirm that the arch did receive historical status. Ironically, the funny thing I find is they were trying to get the whole walkway with the bricks included in that. While they were waiting to have the pass, they started digging up the bricks.
Oh,
Well, a lot of
So
people took those home and sold them on
Yeah.
eBay.
Dave was one of them. He broke into the site and was pouring all this stuff into his backpack. And the sad thing is they should have waited, because that whole area technically should have been included. And the argument was, well, we didn't know, we just started doing it because it was, like,
Yeah.
instead of putting a hold on the construction while they were waiting for this status to happen. Imagine if they'd cut down the arch while all this was happening. Oh my God, I'm having horrible technical difficulties. This was happening and the arch was removed.
Yeah.
There we go. Oh God.
Yeah, so they are going to keep the arch up, which is.
It's a shame about the bricks, though, because if I had known, I would have gone and helped them. I'm like, I'm small, I can fit in little places.
Someone offered me one. I was like, I'm good. I move around a lot,
Oh, I would have taken one in a heartbeat. And
Okay.
Dave did actually offer one. He gave one to Titanic Belfast.
Okay, all right.
He went over there and they had a little
Well,
ceremony where
that's
he
nice.
presented the bricks to the museum.
Ah, oh, lovely.
That's nice. See, that's nice. I think if you do something good with something, and
Yeah.
that's. Oh my gosh! Thank you so much for your time. I
Oh,
noticed
thanks
that
for having me.
we never decided on how long it would go, but it's got to be
I'm
now.
yeah,
your
I'm
time.
unfortunately going to have to wrap up soon too. I do have to go make my family dinner, and
Yeah.
we usually
Steve
eat
wants
early
to
around
get going
here.
with
So
his day. Did
I
you want to
suppose
say
you
anything,
did.
Richard, while you're here?
Oops.
Richard Fuzzy McFuzzface. Oh, so one of these book club meetings, somebody made a comment like, Fuzzy McFuzzface did a great job commentating. So now that's his name.
Yeah, it's just a joke because I'm such a have such the big beard going, but no, I enjoyed the whole thing. I really think that was pretty cool. I'm anxious to actually read the book. I haven't had a chance to, but now given what information's in there, I have no choice. So
You're on the admin team of the book club, Richard. You gotta
yeah, I
start
think it should be
reading more.
mandatory that all admins have to read the book.
Yeah, well,
It's hard to have a book club when the leaders themselves aren't reading the material.
Oh.
I'm not
Thank you for
actually a
having me.
leader. I'm just down in the engine room making sure it's all running smoothly.
Yeah. Oh, well, look, thank you so much. I have to go now and go to bed. I've got an early morning tomorrow. Delighted to have done this and to have been a chance to talk about Samuel and the headstone. So thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely. It's lovely to meet you, Steve, in the flesh. We've been talking for years in print, in typing and print for years, I think, years and years. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Thanks,
Thank
Jill,
you for
this.
doing this.
Oh,
Thank you very much for your
Thank you
time.
for your questions. I think we lost Jill. Yeah.
Yeah, look, when
Jill, I think Jill
when I'm over
froze.
Ireland, you can buy me a few
Yes.
beers. How's that
Definitely,
sound?
yeah.
Hey, and I'll buy you dinner. How's
Yeah,
that, mate?
definitely. Yeah, you're on.
I'll do that for you, mate.
Are
Nice
you
to
going to
see
go
you.
back to bed now, Steve? You're going to go back to bed?
No. I'm going to go for a walk. Actually, Christine
Right.
is up now, and
Ah.
it's 20 past 7. So I'll
Right.
go for a walk. It's not far down to the beach, but I don't walk down to the beach. Bloody
Yeah.
beach. No interest in the beach. Just walk around the block. That's all.
Yeah. Oh.
But hopefully, look, when this COVID-19, once the dust settles, then be able to travel.
Yeah.
But I don't think that no one's going to be able to do anything for about 2 years, I think. So
Yeah. There's a
You know,
big
so that's
push
the-
here in Europe. Spain have said that they'll start accepting people in July. A few of the European countries are telling Irish people and English people, come and have your holidays. So there's
the only problem is that I think is that I'm not actually young anymore. So yeah.
neither am I.
But I haven't. My hair's not blue quite yet. Probably not enough of it.
And you do the hairdresser, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'll just take it from the back. But I think 2 years really before I probably look at going. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I'm vulnerable to get anything, but I don't want to end up with it.
I know.
You'd be on the other side of the world and you get sick.
Yeah.
It's a long way back here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, I will
Right.
go.
Yeah, me too. See you, Alicia. See you, Richard.
Bye. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
care.
Really enjoyed that.
Cheers, brother.
Bye.
Bye.
Nice to see
Yeah.
you, Steve.
Thanks,
Bye.
mate.
Yeah, I'm gonna go too. I'll talk
All
to
right.
everyone next meeting. Jill, I'll probably see you on the chat.
Okay.
Bye. Thanks, Jill.
Bye.
See
Thank
you later.
you.
Steve.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Alicia.
Bye, Richard. Yep, that week.
That was fun.
All right. So now what do? We go off. I got kicked out. I had to get myself back in. I was
Give me a
like,
second.
oh,
Let me end the.
I had live start live.